Mini G over there.
For older gamers like myself, many weekends were spent at arcades, thinking we were awesome by aiming a light gun at an arcade cabinet and just blasting away. And any arcade worth their salt would have a House of the Dead cabinet tucked away in the corner and hidden behind a curtain so not to scare the little ones. Light gun games were all the rage, and they even infiltrated our living rooms with the Sega Saturn and the Sega Dreamcast, and that saved us some tokens and allowed us to have our own mini arcade in our living room. Light gun games have all but disappeared these days, but House of the Dead 2 Remake by Forever Entertainment aims to bring the light gun genre back, minus the guns. What's it like? Save your tokens, warm up those thumbs, and suffer like G did as we review the House of the Dead 2 Remake for Nintendo Switch 2. Before we begin, I just want to have the disclosure that the majority of the footage you'll see in this review is captured on the Switch 2. I did thoroughly test the game on the Switch 1, but unfortunately my dock is having some technical issues, so I was unable to record on that hardware. The House of the Dead 2 is an on-rail shooter that sees you blast your way through hordes of undead, uncover the nefarious scheme going on, and who's behind the outbreak. And that mystery is quickly solved when the bad guy just straight up calls you to tell you he's the bad guy in Act 2.
Yes, this is Amy. Yes. It seems that Goldman left a message for us.
What? From Goldman?
It's a very campy story, and not a lot of it makes sense, so don't expect a deep lore or narrative here. What you can expect, however, is a lot of action. You will constantly be assailed by the undead as you go through stages that have multiple parts and secrets to unlock. There were some cool moments of discovery that I completely forgot about, like saving a driver with a zombie on his windshield, and that took me to a completely different path than my first playthrough, and it also held a hidden assault rifle. Or saving a pair of civilians in the first level took me to a different path, which then had a bunch of different people to save, and also its own secrets to reveal. Saving these civilians will sometimes reward you with items like health kits, or even unlockables that you can use in your next run, like double scores or the not so civilian friendly grenade launcher. There's also some of the cheesiest voice acting in this game, and it is unintentionally hilarious. There were moments where a civilian would ask me to help save their loved one, only for me to fumble with the controls and accidentally dispatch of them, and my character would just flatly turn to them and say, "There was nothing we could have done."
There was nothing we could do.
As a matter of fact, your character, despite this being his second zombie shooting outing, seems rather surprised for the entire duration of the game that he's shooting zombies. While all this production value sounds bad, it's also a part of the charm given the terrible voice acting, and despite the game's horror theme, it ends up keeping the game feel rather light. The real horror does begin though with the control scheme, which seems to require a lot of tweaking to get right. And when you get it there, it still manages to feel off. The game does support gyro controls and standard aiming using the control stick, and while using the control stick does manage to do an okay job, I found gyro to be woefully erratic, even with tweaking. I was also surprised to see the game say it supported touchscreen controls, but unfortunately, touchscreen can only be used in the menus and not during gameplay. As the game is primarily developed for the Switch 1, there are no Joy-Con mouse controls, which is completely understandable, but here's hoping we might see a Switch 2 patch, as that would significantly enhance the fun of the game. The reliance on control stick aiming can be somewhat of a double-edged axe, allowing the player to leave the reticle static in boss fights, allowing bosses to continuously fall on their own sword, so to speak, really negating any challenge, but also making boss fights less frustrating. The controls put me off so much at first that the original score of this review was going to be 20 points lower and closer to 50 out of 100. Thankfully, with a little patience and a little practice, I did find a nice balance that suited me and made the game a bit more enjoyable. Graphically, the game looks really good for a late generation Switch 1 developed game, and while there isn't a large range of enemies, they are detailed and daunting, with various levels of decay, and they just look really gruesome. Bosses, despite being really no fun to fight, actually look really great and varied, and the stages of the game also have a bit of variation to them, and exploring new areas is quite fun. In docked mode, the frame rate is mostly fine on the Switch 1, but in handheld it's a different story. The resolution is lower and it gives the game a more pixelated look, while also suffering from frame skips at certain moments. These aren't low frame rate stutters, just minor noticeable pauses when the game seems to think about your next move. On the Switch 2 in dock mode, the game runs flawlessly, and in handheld mode, it still runs flawlessly, but it does have that lower resolution like the Switch 1 counterpart, and that gives off the same pixelation. For my agents looking into accessibility options, I'm pleased to report that there are a few options here, like increasing the thickness of your reticle, changing its colour, a myriad of sound options including the ability to stop the game screaming reload every 3 seconds, which was heaven sent, and a few controller variations.
I'm not gonna let you
At
get away.
$35 Australian, the mileage may vary depending on how much you like the series. I've so far played the game from start to finish about 10 to 15 times to unlock more goodies to change the feel of my next run. The bosses have definitely worn my patience down, but I'm also still finding things I missed and new paths to explore. And it should be mentioned that the game can also be played with 2 players, each using a single Joy-Con, and that gives the game a little bit more bang for your buck. House of the Dead 2 Remake on Switch isn't an entirely horrific experience, but fans of the series will definitely get the most mileage out of it. Between twitchy and hyperactive controls that take a lot of tweaking to feel right, and arcade mechanics that haven't really been changed to match that control scheme, it would be a hard sell for newcomers, even with a cheaper price point. Still, there's some charm and fond memories in the campiness of it all, and the B-grade voice acting is unintentionally hilarious. Being a fan of the series, I was really looking forward to shooting my way through this classic arcade game. And despite some moments where I felt like I was suffering like G did, I persevered to uncover a fun game with multiple paths and secrets to uncover, and I had a hell of a time doing it. Ultimately, I'm glad House of the Dead 2 has been resurrected for this remaster, rotting warts and all. So, what's it like? House of the Dead 2 Remake is like playing in the arcade, except you no longer have to nag your parents for tokens. I award it a 70 out of 100. Thanks so much for watching my video. If you liked it, the best way you can support What's It Like is by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with your friends. For more reviews, click on the thumbnails to the right, and for everything Nintendo, check out whatsItlike.com.au.